and shortly. Before we get my I want to contrast myself a little bit with what has come before. Brian started by saying everything is false, everything is wrong. I'm going to start with everything is right, but it's temporary, and I think that that's really the difference. What we're doing is the best of all possible worlds. We're doing good things. The history of science is good. There have been problems. There will be problems going forward. The real question is, what are the standards by which we judge our science? And those are not stable. And we'll talk a little bit about that. So you're right now, and you'll be right in the future. But what's right now is going to be wrong in the future, so that's comforting. Allison talked about being confident about our data, and I'm going to ask you, what is confidence for? We know that confidence is good, but what is it for? And the answer is going to be scientific progress. I need to tell you ahead of time, I am absolutely sure I'm the least qualified person relative to the content of what they're presenting. Most of this is going to be philosophy of science. I'm not a philosopher of science. I took 2 graduate courses. And I've got a lot of help. And S.K. Robbins is a philosopher of science, and she said, yeah, that looks good. Actually, she helped me a ton. Amazing things helped me out with this. So we're going to start from philosophy of science. And the question is, why do we need philosophy of science? I'm going to tell you need philosophy of science, and you need it badly. First of all, these people really know what they're doing. And nowadays, philosophers of science are not just historians or people who sit around or people with PhDs in philosophy. They're often people who have extensive bench science experience. They're people who really know things, and if you know a philosopher of science or get a chance to talk to one, they're often fantastic. They're often mean, nasty people too, but they're way smarter than you about this, and they let you know it. Okay. I'm just referring to about 50% of the philosophers of science I know. Progress is a problem for science. It's different from other fields of knowledge in that there's change in what we study, change in what we do. If you're studying fashion, if you're studying history, and so on, there's changes, but what we need is something that there's an improvement. We have to somehow say that we're doing something better, that we know more. And believe it or not, it's very difficult to measure progress. It's really very hard to do that, and it's especially difficult in the psychological sciences to say that we're doing better. We do more, we do different. Proving that it's better is not an easy thing, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what the philosophers of science say that we can and should do. Okay. So a lot of times if you ask people in psychology, well, what are we doing in science? Well, we're moving towards the truth. We're trying to find out what the truth is. And science is the progress from not knowing things to knowing what the truth is. And that is wrong. Because if we knew what the truth is, we wouldn't need science, right? And if you say, okay, yeah, we're just going toward the truth, the goal is truth and we're trying to get there, you're assuming that we know where it is over there and we're moving towards it. All you know is that you're moving. You don't know that you're moving toward the truth. And so you need something to define what is objective knowledge, what is progress, and it's not that easy. The argument of, we don't know truth, but we're moving toward the truth, is called teleological metaphysics. Pull that one out in class. People will think you're smart, or they'll think you're a philosopher. How do you know you're going in the right direction? It's not that easy. Here are a bunch of the traditional candidates from, these are a lot of famous philosophers of science, and if you study this stuff, you discover that you learn this great idea and you think you've got the answer, and 3 papers later you realize just what a foolish idea it was. And this is one of the problems with philosophy, is that a lot of ideas that appeal, especially to those of us who are not sophisticated in them, have various problems with them, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But here's what I want you to think. I want you to think as a pragmatist. I want you to be pragmatic in your philosophy of science and suggest to you that what is science for, what is scientific progress? One, it's solving problems. This is an old idea, but it still works pretty well for us. And another standard is, can we use this stuff? You can build a car, but can you take it out and give it a drive? And if you can take it out for a spin in medicine, in psychotherapy, in getting people to save energy, then you're making progress. And So this is the pragmatic approach, and I've got a list of things that social and personality psychology have made contributions to lately. It's a lot. It's really a lot, and we're doing some really good things in these areas. I didn't get to see Richard Thaler, but he stole everything that we invented and called it behavioral economics. And this is an example of actual progress. Psychology is considered a hub science. If you look up there, where is it? Up here, the size of the science name indicates the amount of citations from other scientific journals. And psychology's got a nice big name. It's not quite earth sciences, but it's pretty good. People from outside of psychology are using what we do. So that's some indication that it's good. This is from the same paper. And by the way, this document, which is going to go up with all the other documents and be made available, has a bunch. I have a fat version of it. It's got a ton of resources on it. And if you want to see these things, I've got the web pages and so on. But this is social psychology, and I'm pretty sure that it involves personality psychology because they're using our journals, which are conflated. And the size of the dot tells you the degree of connectedness to other areas of study outside of it, and this doesn't replicate it. But there are 8 or 9 good strong arrows in there showing that lots of people use our stuff. And as you can see from the size, again, we're not molecular biosciences, but we're doing pretty well. So people use our stuff. And that judgment, that social judgment of the usefulness of our research is a sign of progress. Okay. If you're going to talk about science, so you got to talk about what science is. This is called the demarcation problem. It turns out to be a fantastic and fun problem. What is science? And this is from Paul Thagard, and this is one of the dominant ideas about demarcation. He defines pseudoscience. And then if it's not pseudoscience, it's going to be a science. If it's a pseudoscience if it's been less progressive than alternative theories in terms of developing new data and changing ideas over a long period of time and faces a lot of unsolved problems, but the community of practitioners make little attempt to develop the theory, show no concerns about the evaluation, and are selective in considering confirmations and disconfirmations. And you know that some of the people who are criticizing social psychology are hitting some of those items. But if you are not doing that, if you are attacking all those problems, then you are a science. I just want to say we should listen to Paul Thagard because he was married to Ziva Kunda, a social psychologist. Actually, I talked to Paul. I said, you know, if I show a picture of you with this great social psychologist, Ziva Kunda, people will think that you're credible. He says, what about my 3 psych review papers? And I said, the picture is going to do a better job. So that leads us to ask, what about those BEM ESP studies? Is that science or pseudoscience? And you know about them, that's just what's in the thing. And is it science seriously? Oh yeah, absolutely, it's science. BEM's doing science. Now, I didn't say he wasn't doing shitty science, but he's doing science. He's following the rules, he's open, he is doing all of the kinds of things that make meet the minimal standards of science. He could do better, I think. I want to ask you, is astrology a science? Is alchemy a science? And the answer is, yeah, no. But they used to be. Alchemy and astrology used to be open sciences that collected data, that had a scientific community that were testing the ideas. The practitioners now no longer do that. But actually there is some empirical support for astrology. It's not great, but it's pretty interesting. And so is it a science or not? The demarcation rules are we continually looking at the problems? Are people invested and open to criticism? And now they're not, but they used to be. Okay, and that just makes the point that the community of practitioners is key. Science is not a lone wolf sport where we go off into the lab and find a solution and come out and say, now I know what the answer is. That's not how science works, and it's not how science should work. And as we'll see later, people define what science is by its very social nature. So is it good that BEM did publish those ESP studies? And I'm going to answer, oh, it's awesome that he did. It's awesome. It's embarrassing. But I show here a picture of Pons and Fleischmann, who said that they had found an easy and cheap way to create cold fusion in the lab. They forgot to do the right math. It showed that they would have been dead from neutrons, or neutrons, radiation. They made some very embarrassing mistakes, and what physics did is immediately say, oh, that is not right. They jumped on the methods, they tried to replicate it. Immediately, an avalanche of data suggested that Pons and Fleischmann had it wrong, and physics is stronger for knowing that they've got these open methods, and they've got these ideas, and they've got these people who are competing with each other to come to the right answer, and no cold fusion. Same for ESP, I would argue. There's an avalanche of response to Ben's paper. I think there's still some open questions here about it. We're in the business of doing it, but the fact that we responded so dramatically, so rapidly, and in many ways so carefully should be reassuring to us that that we have a good science going. So nowadays, I would say that philosophers of science are moving toward a model that we'll call social epistemology. And here this is defined as the pursuit of knowledge is best seen as the collective rather than an individual aim. You'll see down at the bottom that I have cited the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. This is an online encyclopedia if you haven't taken a look at it. If you have any questions about some issue that might be philosophical, it's fantastic. It's mostly readable, it's up to date, it's reviewed, it's terrific. So what I want to now is talk to you about a few philosophers of science and some of their ideas, and use that as a way for you to evaluate, are we making progress? What does progress look like? And the first one is Marjorie Green. Marjorie Green is a philosopher of science. She's also a biologist from Davis. I don't know if you knew that. And she has these really great ideas about science is fundamentally a social enterprise, and I'm just going to review some of the points that she makes. We are completely dependent upon each other to be able to do science. And these are just a list of some of the things that we don't do all these things ourselves. We get them from other people. We get scales from other people. We get manipulations from other people. We get protocols. We get trained, and so on. The process of becoming a scientist is fundamentally socialization. We tend to go to undergraduate where we get a degree in something, where we're trained about the knowledge and maybe a little bit about the method. Graduate school is all about the method. We learn a lot of things about how you really do science, and some of which may be in dark arts and some of which may not be. But we also learn statistical techniques, the logic of inference, the logic of theory building. And this one at the bottom is actually one of the most important social skills that you can learn, science skills that you learn socially, which is, what do I do next? Now that I've done a study, what now? And there is no textbook on that. If you are doing new science, what's next is hard to learn, and if you're lucky, you've got a graduate environment or a contemporary environment where people can help you answer that question. Finally, the argument from Marjorie Green is that science is just a part of social life. It's so deeply embedded in society that trying to set it out as apart or different from all other forms of inquiry or knowledge or social practice is a mistake. And I've listed some of the things that are completely dependent upon other people for you to be able to do science. Okay, so where I'm going is I'm going to argue, how do we know that we've got progress in science? The first and most important argument is this one. Progress is represented by consensus. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't attack consensus all the time. People attack consensus all the time. This is critical. If there's no attack on consensus, there's no progress. But we know that there's progress as consensus develops. Right? When you and I agree that that manipulation does in fact do what we say it does, that the data do in fact say that there's no ESP, or that you can undermine intrinsic motivation. When we all agree that these studies say what they say, they manipulate the constructs that they say, and the data have this impact on our understanding, that's what progress is defined. And it shows up in part by connections among labs and cross or interdisciplinary work is actually evidence of progress in science. And that is ascertainable. Okay. Probably the biggest name in the social construction, or the social side of science is Helen Longino. And this is my tagline for it, dethroning the heroic individualist notion of scientific progress. And that would be a great epitaph. I'm going to send it to her for her tombstone. I'm sure she'll love that. But the argument that she makes is that scientists just simply can't be practiced by individuals. It simply isn't science if you're down in the basement doing it yourself. It becomes science when you come out and share it, though, and when other people take a look and criticize it and interpret it and so on. So you've got to have groups doing it. And criticism is the key thing. Now, criticism doesn't mean just saying you're bad. It means the technical term of taking a look at it, evaluating it, deciding what's good, deciding what's bad. It's a fundamentally social exercise. It's not science without that social exercise, says Longino. And what is objectivity? Most of her book, which is, here's her book. This one, it's pretty slow going. But her argument is, what is objectivity? And the answer is that it's shared subjectivity, which sounds stupid and boring, but it's really not. It's when we get together and we talk about what things mean, and we come to an agreement and understanding about what does large N mean, what does your manipulation mean, what is this dependent variable actually measuring, what is that moderator doing, how are these processes causally linked. When we come to agreements as fields and as even just dyads, that's what we mean by objectivity. And it's, of course, fundamentally social. You can't be objective as an individual. Simply impossible by definition for her. And so she makes these points about the social side of science that I'm just going to reiterate for you. Science is practiced by social groups. People don't do it alone. Peer review, we all hate it, but it's really what makes science science. If you have a technique for analyzing something, maybe the replicability of your research program, and you just go on about publishing it, it's not science, it's not allowed into the pantheon of scholarship until other people look at it, talk about what's good about it, what's bad about it, what are your techniques, what are the methods, and so on. So you should think of citation as a social act. Right? When you are citing, you're not merely, as Latour argues, bringing in somebody else to buffer your argument. You're making your argument difficult to contradict because, look, I have an expert. What you're doing is you're saying, I'm connected to this idea, I endorse this idea, these are the kinds of things that we are accepting as part of the pantheon of science. There are negative citations, don't do, there's a lot of good research on this, but see Crandall 95. Go ahead and do that. I'm okay with that. Just spell my name right. Okay. But, okay. What we do in science, we do in public. It's important that a scientific theory be public, right? The elements of what the ideas are have to be out there for scrutiny, or they're not science. If there's magic hand-waving behind the screen, that's not science, right? And that's, of course, a lot of what astrology is I can't let you in on my secret mathematical techniques, but I can show you their results, and so that wouldn't be science. So what makes science is criticism, and the publicity of criticism is unique in science in a way that other areas don't have. Politics has criticism as well, but there's not agreement on what it makes good criticism and what makes bad criticism. That's just yelling. So I want to say objectivity then comes out of social sharing of subjective discussion and agreements. And so you're going to have not objectivity subjective as a hard line, you're going to have a continuum, it seems to be a thing. You're going to have a highly subjective, highly objective stuff. But these are the criteria you can judge whether or not criticism's out there and fair. Are there recognized avenues for criticism, like journals? And right now, of course, we're developing post-publication peer review that's becoming more available. Even social media is doing some of that work, and that the criticism that you find on social media is not always of the highest quality, but it is in fact part of what makes science science and part of what makes our processes more objective. Sharing standards is the intersubjectivity. I want to jump to number 4, which is critical in science, which is you can't just say, well, Popper says it. and then that becomes an authority. We don't allow authority to go in that way. We talk about the arguments, yeah, but the Cornell labs find it, and the Southern Alabama State County campus doesn't find it so. We don't make authority work that way. We have a certain level of equality. So here's progress in a very simple, single line. Open and shared criticism leads to consensus eventually, which defines scientific progress. It's got to be open, got to have consensus, you got progress. It's really that simple. And now you're happy with me. I'm going to make you unhappy, I hope. No, I'm not. So here are some metaphors of science, right? This achievement, I'm following my path, I'm climbing. My idea of progress is that I'm going to go up to and open that door, and the social side of science argues, no, these are the right metaphors to look for. Collaborative, cooperative, teamwork, building on the past, and so on are fundamentally essential. But these are also metaphors of scientific progress. Yelling, screaming, debating, disagreeing. You're going to get progress if consensus develops. A lot of it goes through this pathway. This pathway is good, says the social side of science. But don't be mean. You don't have to be mean. But heated arguments on the elements are awesome, according to this model. Just don't be mean. Okay. Here's an interesting point. If you read about progress and read about what is scientific progress from these philosophers of science, they are not particularly interested in statistical conclusion validity. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be. This is not what they're wetting their pants about, though. Okay. And if you are thinking about statistical conclusion validity and invalidity as the fundamental architecture for scientific progress, you need to connect it to this other stuff. And this is something I think we're not doing as well as we might. There's a lot of talk about, that p-value is, that nominal 0.5 is an actual 0.7, oh shit. And I think that you have to make the critical argument of how that is a problem to progress. So we misunderstand our p-values a little bit. I think we were taught in our first year of graduate school that science involves being skeptical. And so you see an 0.5, you should be skeptical. Okay. Now, bring all that kind of stuff into how does that really affect the debate about ideas? How is it going to lead to agreement on intersubjectivity about what manipulations mean, what data mean? I think that piece is missing in our field. There's room for somebody to do it. One of the things, one of the particular bugaboos for me is that nowadays philosophers of science are not all that interested in the distinction between the context of discovery and the context of confirmation. I would argue that there's actually very, 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 very little confirmation going on, ever. And actually, clinical trials is one of the few clear cases where we know exactly what the hypothesis is and what the dependent variable, how the dependent variable should behave. But I think we do a lot more discovery than we do confirmation. And I say let 1,000 flowers bloom. Confirmation is awesome. Excuse me. Now, I'm glad I'm not a Freudian. Discovery is awesome. Serendipity is fantastic. Knowing everything about your data set is essential. Is that going to screw up your actual p-values? Yeah. Okay. So, from the social side of science, to get progress, you got to have openness. Openness is fantastic. It's not exactly the same thing as transparency, but it's very highly related to it. Openness to criticism is everything. That is the defining nature of the creation or the ability to create scientific progress. Openness to criticism. So be open to criticism, you will help science. You may not help yourself, but you'll help science. Okay. Philip Kitcher, some of you have discovered that I was your reviewers because I always say, oh, you got to read Philip Kitcher, and then people go, oh, okay. Yes, it was me. Kitcher and Hull and Mayo. If you get Kitcher, Hull, Mayo, it was me. Okay. But what Kitcher argues is that progress is the way we do science. If we have consensus practice, If we agree on what is the right way to go about doing things, that's what progress is. And that's not a bad idea. If everybody can agree on that, that is a good indicator that it's a sensible and good idea. So what scientists need to be doing is advancing consensus practice. And actually, this whole session is about that. Now, the question is, which consensus should we come to? That's where we disagreed about so far. But what we're trying to do is develop what is the appropriate consensus with tools, with argument, and so on. And I've got 3 books by Kitcher that are all pretty good. And I'm particularly recommending in the Advancement of Science an article. It's a chapter called The Organization of Cognitive Labor. You can get it online quite easily. The book you can buy, but the Organization of Cognitive Labor, it blew my mind. It's so fantastic. I couldn't believe how fantastic it was. You probably won't like it as much as me. Regression to the mean. But one of the arguments, he does these mathematical models, and he shows how competition and seeking self-interest, one of the things that are criticized in the reform movements, are actually essential to leading to both diversity and criticism and essentially scientific progress. Seeking priority, seeking the grants, seeking the best publications, wanting to be famous, wanting to be the person at the dais instead of at the table. Awesome for science, good for science, and good for the people too. There are problems. Fraud is a perfect example of terrible problems of seeking priority without it. But the motives alone are actually really good for science, and I defer to his authority. Read the article, it's pretty good. But the argument here is self-interest a problem? The answer, I'm going to argue, is no. We seek credit, that's fine. Kitcher argues that it's good. Should we be emotional about our data? Should we have investment? And Mitroff is a philosopher of science who says to take out strong emotions and intense commitment, that's what moves science, is these things. That's what keeps us going. Because you know how many times you have to review an article, revise an article before it gets published? And you're doing this for the good of science? Oh my God. I mean, it's just awful. And so what drives you is you want to get it out there. You want the credit. You love the ideas. You want people to know that you're doing really good stuff. That drives you. That's good. Here's Thagard again telling us that a scientist without passion would be a mediocre scientist. You got to have passion to do good work. What your passion is for is another thing. Okay. Here's where I tell you the old, I'm going to mostly skip this, but it's up there for your interest. When I went to graduate school, Hazel Marcus taught my Intro to Social class in graduate school. It was a great class, but she made us read about 150 pages on the Gestalt versus information integration theory of trait. Oh. And the Gestalt thing says, suppose you get a trait list that says intelligent, tall, blonde, this is some dude who's a criminal. Now that you know he's a criminal, does it change your understanding of the meaning of the word intelligent? Right? And the Gestalt people say, yeah, it changes the understanding of the meaning of intelligent. And the information integration people says, no, it just changes some beta weights in the algebra. And these are actual algebraic equations from information integration theory. And let me just tell you, tons of research, and at the end, what do you know? You can do anything with algebra. And I really thank the researcher, who you may know who it is, I won't say, he's now retired, who did tons and tons and tons of research to show, algebra is very flexible. So what's good for science can be what's different than what's good for individual scientists. I thank him for spending a whole damn career doing algebra. I thank Pons and Fleischmann for embarrassing the hell out of themselves for doing wrong mathematical calculations, because science was better. I thank BEM for publishing those ESP papers, because the immediate reaction is you guys are idiots, but the long-term reaction is going to be we're going to do better stuff, and we know how to do it. We understand replications, we understand data manipulations better, we understand publication bias better. Thank you, Daryl BEM, for making a fool of yourself. And I want to say that actually refutation of ideas, showing that ideas are wrong or hard, I point to Duhem Quine who tell us this. I want to encourage you to think of refutation as degrees of refutation. Scientific ideas don't get nailed dead. They tend to fade away. They tend to be ignored. They tend to become irrelevant. They don't get cited, they don't get taught. If you do that work, you don't get a job. And that's the social side of science, doing refutation. We ignore you. And that's, again, please spell my name right when you cite me, because the worst thing is to not be cited at all. It's even better to say, you're wrong, because at least you said I was interesting. And I was part of building the scientific consensus. A wrong example is a useful example. A snooze fest is what you don't want to be. Being wrong is really not a problem. And so Ferguson and Heen talk about, you know, these things get published and then they never get replicated because there's this huge file drawer. And what I want to say is, it's less of a problem than you might think. It's a problem for meta-analysis, but it's less of a problem than you might think, because if we all fail at some idea, it will go away. It's costly to individuals, but it will go away if it's a bad idea. It just takes a little longer. But actually, nails in the coffin are fairly rare as a general thing. Okay. So, are we making progress? And I want to argue, yeah, we've got a lot more consensus than you might think. Here are some things that look like low consensus items, but are in fact high consensus items. We mostly agree on most of these things, even though we argue about them. Here is evidence of progress in social personality psychology. New journals, new students. Several years ago, there was a meeting of SPSP. Brian was presenting there, and we were saying, what are we going to do about these huge problems in our field? It's not your language, but this was, the temperament was, oh my God, it's all a disaster. What are we going to do? And I said, have you looked outside the door at all those students and all those excited people and the amazing posters and presentations? So yeah, some stuff is crap, but there's a fantastic flow of amazingly good stuff. There's just a mountain of it. And you are going to be inundated and overwhelmed at this conference with great things and new ideas and fantastic people. And that is evidence of scientific progress. Even the White House is hiring social psychologists. But philosophy of science is not helping us with this question. And we really need help with this. How much error can we tolerate? If you think of not at the individual paper level, but at the whole field, there's DRAC, there's false positives. In the research literature, how much can we tolerate? We can tolerate some because Daryl Bem publishes and we explode, our heads explode, and eventually we fight with editors who say they won't take it. But is anybody out there who doesn't know that the Daryl Bem ESP papers have been multiple replications of failure? Does anybody not know that? Nobody's raising their hand because you'd be too embarrassed. We all know that, right? That problem is solved, I would say. So science can be self-correcting, even with allowing bullshit into our top journals. It's okay. The real question is, what is our level of tolerance? And I don't think it's a mathematical question. I think it's a fundamental social and philosophical question. I don't know the answer to it, and they haven't helped us yet. So, if there's just one takeaway, all practices are trade-offs, just like Eli said. When someone attacks the status quo, they are presenting a new set of values. It's a new value trade-off, and so I've got a recommendation. When a position seeks to change the scientific consensus or consensus practices, take a good, long, hard look at what the value trade-offs are and make your own judgment on that basis. Up on the thing, this is going to go up here, some resources for the beginners, and maybe more intermediate. The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. It's so awesome, I feel like I'm in college again. It's awesome. It's like, you know, in graduate school, in those first few years, you go out of class and you'd argue with your peers about what you read. It's like this. It's awesome. Okay, here's some blogs on these issues that you might want to read. I think they're good. And this thing will make your head spin, but she's a neo-Popperian and is a lot of fun. And she's written a lot about, as you can see, this one is Some Ironies in the Replication Crisis in Social Psychology. Fourth installment. So she is a philosopher of statistics and quite interesting. Okay, so I didn't leave much time for questions, but maybe if there are some. Yeah, okay. Hi.
So I agree with the standard wisdom that science is self-correcting and sort of it's okay to have, and I definitely agree with this, that it's okay for there to be some mistakes and whatnot. But it seems like the time horizon on correction matters a lot, and it matters a lot in the sense of, think all the comments that are about people trying to get jobs and whatnot. So if science doesn't correct on the order of 5 years. Well, that's someone just left the field because they were chasing down, you know, a priming effect or an embodied cognition effect or whatever it is, and you say, oh, they didn't get it because the original thing was wrong. I would have said, gosh, I bet that person would have voted for, we should really have less drag.
Yes, you're raising up the individual scientist versus science problem. And of course, the most people at risk are the people without stable employment, which is, at this meeting, most people. And now the problem, of course, you're going to ask is, how do I make it better for the individual scientist without harming science? And that's going to be a problem. The timeline issue is, you can clamp down on error by accepting nothing. I mean, perfect way to make sure there's no errors to accept nothing. And the minute you let in anything, you're going to let in error. And so the real question is, and I don't think we know how to answer this, is how to balance scientists versus science, how to balance error with innovation and opportunity. And we need to have that discussion. We can't have a one-sided discussion, is my whole point. And then Eli.
I'm wondering why you choose consensus as your marker of progress instead of something like utility. Seems like consensus is more of a byproduct of something like utility. And I just wonder, can you say?
Yeah, well, I started with utility from that pragmatic thing, and I built it into a consensus idea by saying that other people are using it, and that builds the utility and the social construct at the same time. I want to tell you, if you were waiting for my ideas at the level of philosophy of science, I simply didn't give them to you because I suck at it. And these people, so I was really presenting their position. But now I want you to ask your question again.
Well, just the idea that I'm nervous about this idea of consensus in the absence of utility. You know, so like this idea of consensus seeking, sort of as a goal by itself, without sort of these other things that even like we talked about, the other kinds of things that you talked about.
Yeah. Well, for one thing, we're not going to build consensus on stuff that's stupid and that doesn't matter. So social psychology says very little bit.
That's my point.
Right. So the consensus builds in the utility in part because we spend our time doing things that we think matters, and we build consensus on that. We might agree on the social psychology of hairless rats, but we're not going to spend any time on it because I may be the only person in the room who cares. All right. So I think that utility is essentially built into consensus, in part because if you have multiple people chasing it and having different points of view on it, then that it becomes an operational definition of usefulness or importance. I think that's the social side's argument. Eli?
Maybe you can do your best to channel the philosophy of science perspective, or a philosophy of science perspective, on one of the issues that's really plagued me, one of the questions that's plagued me about how we move forward. So there's long been peer review, everyone knows how that works, that is published, but now there's been this new thing of post-publication peer review, and that's interesting and I think has value. There's a third thing, which is publishing new scientific ideas in social media, so the blogosphere or elsewhere. And I honestly have no idea how to deal with that. So the reason why I ask, and the reason why it's relevant to your talk, is that's also part of like social discourse. So in some sense you could say, and maybe Brian, maybe you would say, like, sort of who cares where it came out? Like the peer review process is maybe archaic or something. But let's just stipulate for the moment that we're not ready to jettison peer-reviewed journal articles for the moment. Let's say I'm doing research in an area that has like a published literature that looks like X, but a blogosphere literature that looks like Y. Is it appropriate for me as the author, as the editor, as the reviewer, to weigh all of that stuff, to dismiss the unpeer-reviewed stuff as water cooler chit-chat? I have no idea. Does philosophy of science have any guidance for us on that?
It does. It says that you should build new outlets for yourself, that you need to build new structures, new social structures, create a new journal for yourself, and so on. Yes, or get your students.
My wife accuses me of doing that already.
There are two positions. David Hull argues. You want me to stop that?
Well, yeah.
In a word,
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a 15-second. David Hull says that building infrastructure is the way to do it. Feuerabend says anything goes. And that anarchic argument from Feuerabend is not as stupid as it sounds. Anything goes works pretty damn well. Galileo, of course, I'm sorry, Galileo was wrong in his fight with the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church was scientifically correct, says Feuerabend, because there was no theory of optics to know why telescopes work. And so there was no way to know from Galileo's observations what those data really meant, and so be a little skeptical of your data and say it's just an idea. And Galileo says, no, I can convince everybody, and I'm going to go ahead and just assert that I've seen it and I know my system is correct. And the Catholic Church punished him, and by the normal rules of science, they're right. Of course, Galileo was right. Anything goes, says Feuerabend. Maybe that's what you should do.
So yeah, maybe you should
Okay.
continue that
Thanks.
discussion.